but I think that the government definitely needs to trust its people more. And what happens is you get a lot of Republicans that see the hypocrisy when they say, "Oh, we need smaller government. We need government out of our business." Unless it comes to, school, unless it comes to uh, people, transgender people, unless it comes to, and they have all these asterisks that they keep hanging out over this thing that they're saying, and it leads me to believe that they're not at all for small government. They're not at all for getting government out of our business.
So, Dan Schaefer, you are a Democrat out of Missouri, right?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So, I live in Missouri too. I live on the other side of the state. I'm in St. Joseph, Missouri, which is about an hour north of Kansas City, and you
Yep.
are by St. Louis, right?
That is correct. Just south of St. Louis.
Right on. So, what's politics like over there? Because over here, I think we are quite a bit more conservative on this side of the state than you guys are on the other side.
Yeah, I think it depends upon where you are. I know, like, just north of you is where I don't know if you know who Jess Piper is, but
Yeah.
she ran for the first district up there. She's had a really difficult time. She only ran once, but she's quite a firebrand for the more progressive side. But I don't know. I have to think about it a little bit because my brother actually lives just south of there, down like near Lee's Summit, and that's where Rick Bratton is. He lives in Rick Bratton's territory. He's a senator that is extraordinarily conservative, part of the Freedom Caucus. But we got nutcakes out in this area too. I mean, out in St. Charles County, we got the same guys. We got some guy named Nick Schroer, who's he's known for doing like all kinds of publicity stunts, like using flamethrowers to burn books and things like that, and playing baseball with cans of Bush Light, or no, it was Bud Light, wasn't it? It was
Bud
Bud
Light,
Light.
yeah.
So they're out in
Yeah.
front of the Capitol building. One guy's pitching, the other guy's swinging a bat, and they're hitting cans of Bud Light. Yeah, he just does all kinds of garbage like that. So I think there's pockets of it all over the state, actually.
Yeah. So I actually voted conservative the last couple of years.
Hmm.
The last few years. I voted Donald Trump in 2020 and 2024.
Hmm.
And my reasoning for doing so, man, is I before probably 2018 or so, having a conversation with me, you would have thought that I was, hardcore Democrat. But
Hmm.
I am more like middle of the road kind of.
Sure.
And what happened to me, man, was I kept getting personally attacked for my views.
Hmm.
And a lot of these things like didn't even matter to me. Like social issues, um, the abortion thing was a big issue that caused some issues in my personal life because I was one of those type of people like when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I apologized on social media to all my female friends and then it was more explained to me why. So my brother and I had a conversation about why he thought that Roe v. Wade was overturned. And it would basically had everything to do with going back to states and pulling the federal government out of that that social issue and leaving it up to states. And once I understood it that way, I tweaked the way I voted here in Missouri.
Yeah.
And as you know, we had kind of a bellwether election in 2024. And Missouri classically has always been like a bellwether state. And we
Mhm.
vote conservative, but on social issues, we vote progressive.
Correct.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, you said several things here, and I want to sort of like parse them one at a time here. First of all, to your recent thing about, Missouri voting progressive, or when they vote on issues, they vote progressive. When they vote for candidates, they go conservative. That is a very interesting issue, and that's one of the reasons why I'm proud to say that I'm a progressive. And that doesn't mean I'm a progressive in the sense of being fiscally progressive. I'm actually fiscally conservative. But I think that the government definitely needs to trust its people more. And what happens is you get a lot of Republicans. I see the hypocrisy when they say, "Oh, we need smaller government. We need government out of our business." Unless it comes to, school, unless it comes to uh, people, transgender people, unless it comes to, and they have all these asterisks that they keep hanging out over this thing that they're saying, and it leads me to believe that they're not at all for small government. They're not at all for getting government out of our business. And so, in that case, I almost sound more conservative than a lot of the Republicans that I know. And I've made this before. I've been on the air at a very conservative radio station here in St. Louis. I said the same thing. I told the two DJs, I said, I'm more conservative than you guys are. Um, so that's I'm not sure how to split that or how to parse that together, I should say, in terms of people voting for conservative candidates yet being progressive. That's a bit of a phenomenon, and I think a lot of it has to do with tribalism. People say, "I was born Republican. I'm going to vote Republican the rest of my life," and I get that. I get that. So the Republican Party, I think, has drifted quite far away from most people. I myself voted Republican when I first started voting. I'm showing my age here, but I voted for Reagan both times, and yeah. And after that, I never voted for a Republican president after Reagan, but I did vote for independents for president. So that's the kind of guy I am. Now, talking about you talk about going back to states with Roe v. Wade. I thought that was a goalpost that was going to get moved, and indeed, I'm right. They said, okay, we're going to move it back to the states and let the states decide. And almost immediately, in the same breath, a lot of the Republicans up on Capitol Hill are saying, no, we want to make it nationwide. We want to create a nationwide abortion ban. You hear that stuff from like J.D. Vance and so on. And so I knew that was going to happen, and I knew it was a ruse. I knew it was a lie that they were telling again. Um, the other thing too, you talked about being chastised for your perspectives, and this goes back to I wrote a paper about this some time ago, but it goes back to 2016, Michelle Obama in the DNC convention. She said, "When they go low, we go high."
Yeah.
And I get where she was coming from, but boy, oh boy, was that the wrong thing to say. Because that just basically what that says is if you don't agree with my moral perspective, you are lower than me. You are you
Right.
are not worthy of dignity. And I don't look at it that way. And I think that was a really horrible thing to say, but I think she enunciated to a large degree what the problem the Democratic Party has at this point. They're trying to get over it, but they have to stop this perspective of if you don't agree with us, you're. I get if you don't agree with us, okay, we don't like you or something like that. But to say if you don't agree with us, you're lower than us. I mean
Or
that is
or
like
wrong. Or
or
wrong.
yeah or
That's
just wrong on an absolute level, and I don't agree with that at all. And so I'm still a bit of an iconoclast within the Democratic Party, and so far they haven't stopped me. I told them, I'm going to run on some of these issues that the Democratic Party may find objectionable, but I'm going to that's who I am, and they're fine with it. So I'm going to go ahead and run for it.
I that's awesome because like right now I see a whole lot of I see a so when I speak to Democrats or liberals in general, when I speak to them, it's almost like they have to follow the party line or their arguments have no legs.
Yeah.
And that's where I get the the Democratic Party in Washington is so far removed from normal everyday life that they don't. So Donald Trump, how he won is he identified and got together his base, and
Mhm.
it doesn't seem like the Democrats are interested in their base. It seems like it's we know better, we'll take care of this, we'll run the ship, you guys just vote for us, and then ultimately nothing is getting done. I've spoke on this a couple of times on the podcast. So the thing that I'm seeing right now with the Democrat and Republican parties in Washington, not necessarily seeing it so much in the state here. In Washington, what I'm seeing is everybody's just against Donald Trump and his policies, and whatever Republican Party policy pops up, everybody's just automatically against it on the left. There's no ideas. Um, there's no negotiations. There's none of that. Everybody on the left is just kind of like against these things and not presenting an argument against these things or um, a negotiation. Nothing. There's been no back and forth. Chuck Schumer, he's one of those guys that's been vocal about a lot of the things that he believes in over the years. And now you just see once Donald Trump is on talking about some of these issues, Chuck Schumer flip flopped, and Nancy Pelosi's done the same thing. It's just I don't know what to say when I see these people on TV and they are talking all this. You know, we're against this, we're against that. And then 5 years ago, you could pull up on the internet 5 years ago that they had said the complete opposite.
Yeah. It's a problem on both sides. I mean, let's flash back to like 2008 after Obama won, and Mitch McConnell shortly afterwards famously said, "We're going to make him a one-term president. We're not going to cooperate with him at all on anything." Um, Even
How
then, you can
about
go
that
back
guy,
further than
Mitch
that.
McConnell? He's something else, ain't he?
I was, side note, I was mowing my lawn the other day and it came across this box turtle. I almost ran over it. It's like, oh my gosh. So I picked him up. He's a fairly good sized turtle. And I introduced him to my wife as Mitch. So,
He's a
uh,
character. I don't that's another issue too that we'll have to talk about is all these old people that are in power that won't let go of power on both sides.
oh yeah, I'm totally for that. I think the future of the party is more like along, at least as far as the Democrats are going. Um, More along the line of AOC. Not that she's young, she's what 35 now, I think, but it's not the youth because she pairs up with Bernie Sanders, who's like, he's older than you and I put together, basically. Well, maybe not, but so it's the new perspectives, the new viewpoints, and the Democratic Party just really hangs on to the old guard, and I even think that Hakeem Jeffries is part of that whole thing. I think he needs to go too, honestly. Maybe not go in terms of like being voted out of office, but I don't think he needs to be the minority leader because I don't think he has that fire in the belly like a lot of other people do. We need to be taken into a new direction here, I feel. And Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and Barbara Boxer. I mean, she was there until she basically died. It was, I mean, yeah, you're right. They're around too long, and we just got to just do a sweep of those. But that's nothing. We can't control that. We talked about following the party line. What's interesting is because I was talking to some of the state Democratic level people just yesterday, as a matter of fact, and they're talking about they think the Republicans are more top down in terms of their control. They will
Yes,
announce their
absolutely.
policies and then push it down all the way down to their state level representatives, who then push it down to their constituents. Whereas the Democrats, I think they're trying to transition now to a bottom up sort of thing. So they're telling us all as candidates now to go out there and engage with people. Host, in fact, we're going to have a town hall here that we're putting together in about 2 weeks. And we're just trying to get people in to talk to us, making phone calls, having small meetings and such. It's time to get out of our shell and incorporate more of a bottom up sort of approach. I don't know if the top level Democratic Party in DC is really ready for that, but Ken Martin, the Democratic chairman, is pushing for that. So we'll see how far he gets. Um, yeah. So
So my
I mean,
concern with that though,
mhm.
is getting social issues at the national level. We don't need that.
Yeah, yeah,
That's part of what's the problem right now in national politics is and this is on both sides. I can't stand identity politics.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is it is like when Trump was first elected, when he first started, this year, uh, I was good with about 90% of what he was doing. And
Hmm.
as a matter of fact, I'm good with about 90% of what he's doing now. But I wasn't afraid to speak out against that 10%, that
Hmm.
15%. And that's the problem with identity politics is there's a lot of people on the right that are not doing that. They are 100% go MAGA, go Trump, no matter what he does. That stuff needs to stop too, because
Right.
like as far as I'm concerned, that's going to push people like me just as far away from the Republican Party as it did the Democrat Party.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people who voted for Trump. I have a next door neighbor who mixed his vote. He voted for Trump on the national ticket and voted for me on the local ticket. Um, because he's basically like an issues oriented kind of guy, and he's not into in identity politics either. But I think that we get into this identity politics because it sells.
Yeah.
It gets the clicks on the web pages. It gets the check marks at the voting booth. People get kind of wrapped into this whole thing. In Missouri here, we've been struggling a lot with transgender issues, and they want to talk about men playing in women's sports. And I think you would find that a lot of Democrats, including myself, agree with a lot of that stuff. I you know, I
I
wouldn't say
think
a
that's
lot
a
of it, but
manufactured issue, as a matter of fact. I do think that's a manufactured issue because
yeah.
I live in the sixth largest city in the state of Missouri,
Hmm.
and it's not an issue here. Like
No, it never is.
every now and then an issue pops up, and we'll deal with it at that time. But there's no need to. I don't think that there's a need to address it at the state or
No,
national
no,
level. I really don't.
and the thing is, you say it's a manufactured issue. I always come to page 1270 of Title IX, which I've memorized that number, by the way. If you look at the very bottom paragraph there, it's written in lawyerese, but Title IX is the education. The law is coming out of the education Title IX statement back in the 1970s. But basically, it describes page 1270 describes that men playing in women's sports, men who identify as women and want to play in women's sports, that's not allowed. I mean, that's right there in Title IX. And so I don't understand, again, a lot of people, particularly Republicans, try to tar the Democrats with this. And first of all, I'm with you. It's really not an issue in very many cases. And secondly, it's already Congress has already stated that this shall not pass. Um, it's not the and I sympathize with men and women that are going through this, and I think they should be allowed to express themselves any way they want. I don't have a problem with that at all, but I do have a problem when you have women that young women who have tried to become best at what they do, their sport, whether it's basketball or track or whatever, and really train for it, and then just and a man comes along and beats them at it, and I don't think that's fair. It may be good for the person that's winning that race, for the man who identifies as a woman, but the greater good is not served in that situation. And I just have to say, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. But it's hardly worth spending more than more than a minute of discussion about because I
Right.
don't think it's a big issue, anyways.
Right. I absolutely agree. I've actually looked at that issue from several different angles, and I can't come up with any reason why it's even an issue in politics or why we're even talking about it, because it's less than 1% of the population. It's not an issue, except when it is an issue, like it is addressed at that time. It's not that we don't need laws. We don't need the government to step into that. And that's one thing I have against the right. It wasn't an issue until they made it an issue.
Right.
And it's it's one of those things that's. But here's another thing on the flip side of that, there is an ideological thing going. I don't know how to explain it any other way, but there's something going on here in the United States. I actually think we're on a war footing. I think
Mhm.
we're headed for World War III, and I think the people in power on both sides are kind of trying to prepare us for that. Um, it's
You're
it's
talking about a
very.
civil war sort of thing, or
No. I think we're headed towards like World War.
oh,
If you look at the things that are going on right now across the globe, you're looking at Russia, Ukraine, you're looking at Israel, Gaza, and you're looking at Iran, and
mhm.
all those things are popping off on the other side of the globe. Then you got stuff going on in Africa, and there is at the center of all these things, there's three superpowers. There's us, there's China, and there's Russia. Both China and Russia are doing things just like that. So right now, I can see comparisons between right now and what happened pre-World War I and
Mhm.
pre-World War II. And Donald Trump actually just got back from the Middle East, and he was doing some business deals with people over there, with Qatar and Saudi and all those. When you take a step back and look at that as a big picture, it's like they're taking sides. They're choosing sides. Who are you going to? And I think ultimately the tariff stuff, I think that had a lot to do with that as well, because one of the first things we did, we went after Mexico and Canada, and there was no reason to do that other than to see which side they're on, see, start that negotiation, start those conversations, and see how far we can take them and see whose side that they're really on. As a matter of fact, during some of these negotiations, Canada had, there was a couple politicians in Canada that had said, we'll just go to China. And I think that's part of the reason why it was ultimately done is the deep state is a thing. And I think it's working behind the scenes no matter who's in power.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't. I actually don't feel. I don't share that feeling in terms of international war. One thing that's happened that the tariffs have highlighted for us is how interdependent all of our economies are. And so, it was. I remember the joke years ago, back like in the 1980s, the Japanese people in Japan were buying up all of the Hawaiian Islands and just buying up all kinds of real estate in the Hawaiian Islands. And I said, well, it could be a good thing because they're not going to bomb their own territory again, right? But that might have been
But
an unfair comparison because
that's what a
they
reasonable person might think. A reasonable person might think that. But so China's kind of doing the same thing. They're invading the mainland.
yeah,
Um,
you're right, but I just see that as an economic conflict at this point. If nothing
true,
else,
true. But what would take that? What would be the catalyst from taking it from an economic issue to a war issue? As if you ask me, now this issue has been going on for about a year. Apparently, that there was a Chinese um, national who had brought in some spores
Mhm.
for some uh, agro terrorism is what they called it.
Yeah,
And these spores are they it's called blight. I think they infect the crops with blight,
yeah.
and it causes issues with animals and people and all this, that, and the other thing. If you ask me, that was an act of war, and the CCP, the Chinese government, was implicit in the paperwork and all that stuff that I've seen. And
Mhm.
like, there, if it's just an economic thing, why would we? Why would China be doing that kind of stuff? And
Well, I have to ask.
why is there no pushback against the Chinese government for doing things like that as well?
Yeah, I'd have to ask a pretty deep question about that because I do know that the hog farmers here in Missouri, there are almost no more independent hog farmers in Missouri. Why do I start with hogs? Because China is one of our biggest purchasers purchasing agents of hogs. They were, I don't know if they are anymore. It's been a while since I checked up on it, but
You
they
want to
were
know how
one
that
of the
happens,
largest.
Dan? How that happens is so we've got a pork. We actually have a big pork plant here in the city that I live in, and it is Chinese owned. And
Yeah.
the problem, the problem with that is it was politicians that brought it here.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah. But
when we said no, we said no. The population said no. We didn't want this thing, and because the company who owned it was a Chinese company, and so when we said no, they brought in another company called I can't remember the name of the
Smithfield
Triumph
or
Foods. Yeah, Smithfield is it's owned by Smithfield.
no.
We brought in them, and then came 80% of their workforce was immigrants
Yeah.
and on green cards, and some of them were illegal. Within the first couple of years this place was open, they shut down like 80% of it because they were illegals. We've had a massive issue with that, and it was politicians not doing their due diligence that brought it here.
Yeah. Yeah. We can thank Eric Schmidt for that. Yeah, if you go back into the Missouri, Eric Schmidt is now our senator, who's, I can go on and on about him. I've actually filed some two of these, what's it called, sunshine requests
Yeah.
against him. He's he's ignored both of them. But pork is kind of a sidetrack. I was using that as an example because you're right. China is investing a lot in American agriculture, soybean, pork, and so on. And so, I, on one hand, I don't like it because we get the hooks of another country into our own country. On the other hand, though, um, let's face it, it's becoming a global economy, and the thing that America has to do, which I doubt if Trump has actually got the right track on this one. But what we need to do is position ourselves in a really good place so that we can come out, not necessarily ahead, but we don't want to fall behind, right? We want to have, equal. We want to have everything fair, but we want to make sure we get our slice of the pie. And
Yeah, and but the problem is it's not fair. It's not far. It's not fair by a mile,
Oh, well,
by a
I
long
wouldn't
shot.
disagree with you because, if you give someone an option to grab a big bag of money off of your table, it's your money. They'll take it, right? So, we got to be careful. And this goes into so many different things, but politicians are notoriously bad negotiators when it comes to business. Notorious. Look what's happening right now in Missouri, and I know it's a nationwide audience, but in Missouri here, the governor called a session back for our legislature to, among other things, decide whether to fund a new stadium for Kansas City's football
I
team.
just we can talk about that all you want to. It pisses me off. I love the Kansas City Chiefs. They're my favorite. I'm home team, but it pisses me off that I have to pay for that stadium.
Well, yeah, it's been shown, and I wrote an article about this as well. I have the receipts for it. It's been shown that these stadiums don't pay back what they take in the taxpayer money. But this is the attitude. This is what happens when you send politicians to negotiate deals for the people. The people always end up in a horrible position. In the case of the stadium in Kansas City, I don't think they've signed it yet. But in that case, it turns out that the people, the taxpayers, hardworking American families, hardworking Missouri families, are taking all the risks.
Yeah.
And the fat cats, the elite, they get all the rewards. And what makes it sting even harder is when you try to go see a game and you try to buy a ticket to see the game, they just tell you to empty out your wallet and tell you to get a second mortgage for your house. I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course, but
Yeah,
they don't
you're
make it a
you're
reasonable
pretty
price.
close. To take my family, it costs about $1,500
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go to a
and
football game.
this is to attend in a stadium that you're going to be paying for.
Yeah.
And now they're gonna charge you $1,500. How many people can afford $1,500? Maybe once a year, you forego your vacation or something, and you go see a football game or
Yeah.
something. This is what happens when you allow politicians to negotiate. Now, there's also the approach that says, well, maybe you need a business person as to be involved in politics. This is what we got with Donald Trump, right? This was a big selling point for Trump at first. The problem with business
At
is that,
first.
yeah, at first, yeah. The problem with business is that they'll negotiate the same kind of deals. They'll let the taxpayers take all the risks while their business buddies get all the rewards. So what we really need are politicians to get in there. And I'm not saying politicians are notoriously bad, but a lot of them are on the take. I mean, a lot of them are on the take in the sense that they're taking money from special interest groups. And it's quite obvious, you know. I see you're shaking your head, yes, because this happens a lot. I'm going to ramble here, but my opponent in this upcoming election, I had lunch with him last week, and you know, we didn't argue, right? We just talked about this exact same topic, and he and I are on the same page in this one. Like, we got to get rid of this money in politics because this is what's really messing up the deal. It's really screwing people even when it comes down to the stadium in Kansas City. I just can't help thinking that we're going to get screwed on this deal. Just,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the stadium thing for me, I'm willing to take a chance on. I will let everybody else decide what we do on that stadium because I am too close to the situation. I am a huge Chiefs fan. I've got autographed pictures on my wall. I've got autographed helmets, lots of memorabilia. So I want to almost kind of recuse myself from voting on that. If I had to make a vote, I would vote yes, simply for the fact um, I remember what the team was like before Lamar Hunt died.
mhm.
And when the day that I found out Lamar Hunt passed away, God rest his soul, I told my friends and family members, I was like, good, you know, the kid's going to be in charge now. He might open up the purse strings and we might actually get a winning team now. And not that we had a bad team before, it was just they couldn't get there. You know what I mean? And then when Clark Hunt took over football operations, we started winning and we had a couple real bad years in there. But those real bad years taught us some things. And then we brought in Andy Reid, and the rest is history. And that's mainly the reason why I'm willing to take the chances because Clark Hunt took the chance on us. You know, he spent lots of money that he didn't have to spend uh, to bring us a winning football team. And now we have that. We have a Super Bowl winning team. And because they were willing to, you know, stay in the stadium for X amount of years, and I'm willing to give it a shot. But the caveat to that is it hurts. It hurts a lot to stand up and be told that there's several billionaires in on this deal and they're asking me, which I'm broke, man. We make less than 100 grand a year. And like they're asking me to pay for this $5 billion stadium. And I'm like, it doesn't help me any, except it keeps my team playing. But there's a lot of billionaires in on this deal. Why don't you guys put up the money, you know?
Yeah, well,
And
I'm
it's,
totally with you on that. Why not structure it as a loan? Why
yeah, that'd
not, you
be
know, create a
awesome.
bond or something like that and structure it? I'm totally for that because I know that if I don't know that much about Kansas City football. I mean, I just, you know, I like to watch a game once in a while, but and I'm a fan of the Chiefs as well in sort of a distant way. But why not structure this thing as a loan in the sense that people can will get paid back and with a little bit of interest. I mean, is it that is that going to stop the deal? And I understand also that there's this threat hanging over everybody. Say, well, if we don't do it, then the Kansas side of Kansas City is going to take over and build a stadium for them. And so that's the quandary that you're put into. And yeah, it's the same thing that happens here when we were trying to attract, I think it was Google was coming up with their second world headquarters, and every city was out there just falling all over themselves, saying how much of a tax break they're going to give to these businesses, and these businesses got to choose, you know, which city they would give them the best deal. I did not want to take part in that at all. I said, screw that. If we can't sell Missouri for what it is, and Missouri is a great state, uh, one thing I learned in sales is that you sell on value, not on price.
Yeah,
So you sell them on the value of living in Missouri. You sell them Missouri. You don't sell them the tax breaks. You sell them living in Missouri, what it's like here. That's the way we should approach it. But instead, no, they want to give tax breaks to these big businesses. They're going to come into town, they're going to do their thing, they're going to put extra stress on our infrastructure. They're going to pay people, if it's Amazon or something like that, they pay people less than starvation wages, and the government has to subsidize the people anyways, and it's a whole different story there. But in effect, they're really not providing that much to the community. They're not being good members of the community. And I want businesses to be good members of the community because if you're a good member of the community is going to pay you back in
absolutely.
tenfold. But again, it boils down to, do the politicians really understand this? Or maybe they do understand it, but they're getting money from their lobbyists, and I'm not sure what the story is, but that's one of the reasons why I'm running. So I want to get on the
Well,
inside and figure out what's going on.
you know politics here in Missouri, you know that it doesn't have to be lobbyists. They do a lot of backdoor deals that and then they don't mind if people know about it either.
Yeah, yeah,
The Missouri still runs on the good old boy system, and
yeah.
it's very very prevalent in politics, especially where I live. Like news that happens here doesn't travel away from here, and like I said, we're the sixth largest city in the state. So if something big happens here, like a few years ago, the FBI was investigating our school district, and like it never made national news. Nobody knew about it. And they embezzled millions from our school district.
Wow.
And yeah, and our school district is still trying to recover and still trying to gain public trust back from that issue. And they keep just making it worse and worse and worse. It's just horrible. I'm afraid eventually the state's going to step in, and I don't want that I don't want that to happen because like this is a small. It feels like a small community, but we're 40 square miles. The city is, so it's
Hmm.
a very large city, but it's small population. We think we got like 76,000 here. Um, the last thing I want is the state to that come in and because then they completely ruin things. Like
Yeah.
everything that we've built up over the last 20, 30 years will just be completely decimated by the state and it'll go back to bare bones like it used to be. And
Yeah.
I'm not all about that. I am more of a progressive when it comes to education simply for the fact I understand how important education is, and especially public education, because it's like, you know, I'd say 90% of the population goes to public school. So
Yes.
it is very, very important to me. And one thing that you did say is like these corporations and businesses don't take care of Missouri because, uh, for whatever reason, our public utility structure is ridiculous. I
Yeah.
was with my electric bill, just got handed a rate increase and it was a huge one. And my issue with the rate increase was the reason why they said they wanted a rate increase was to upgrade infrastructure. They've been saying that same thing for 30 years, and I've not seen any upgrades. I've the upgrades that they talk about is transmission and new poles. Every now and then we'll see them bring in some new poles, but by and large, they don't do any work around here, but we are expected to pay for upgrades that we have never gotten.
Didn't we just vote on that the last time around? I think they voted to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
Um,
And
I
that's that they keep voting for it to allow it to happen, and it's the Republicans that are doing it. And that's my biggest issue with the right here in Missouri is public utilities are raping us and
Yeah.
not providing the infrastructure upgrades that they're supposed to be. Like our sewer bill here in the city of St. Joe is so astronomically high. We have a two-bedroom. It's our house is less than 1,000 square feet, and my sewer bill is $120 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's and my house is only worth $140,000.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's like, I pay all this money for a good infrastructure and we get a stiff wind and I'm out of power for 2 days.
Yeah. That's Yeah, going back to utilities there is we have Ameren Electric here, and I know that the state of Missouri has kind of a patchwork of small independent utility companies. I forgot what they call them. There's a special term for them. Um, I am concerned. I voted against that issue because not that I don't want utility companies to expand, but why don't we have these billionaires take some of the risks rather than us? Secondly, is I'm afraid of things like First Energy. I think it's First Energy is the Ohio Valley had First Energy. I don't know if you're familiar with that,
Yeah, yeah.
that took place there, where there was a lot of corruption within the utility company, and it was covered over for years. There's also another company in South Carolina. I forgot the name of this company. They were going to build a nuclear reactor and they charged people for it in advance, exactly the way they're doing in Missouri. They said, "Oh, we're gonna expand and create this nuclear power plant," and they abandoned it after spending like $1 billion on it. And so meanwhile, people just had that taken out of their utility things, utility bills every month. Yeah, you can see it even in locally here in Ameren. We have a power plant that just is being decommissioned, and I think it's the Merrimack Power Plant, and it's a surcharge. It's itemized right on our bill. It says decommissioning of a power plant. I'm like, why why am I paying for that? So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. It's public utilities are where these utility companies, they're private, but they serve a public interest. So there's a lot of government control over it, but the government itself can get corrupted, and you
Yeah.
run into these types of situations. And like you say, people voted for it, and I think it was Republicans pushing for it. But on the other hand, it was like I don't see the value for the average person coming out of that, and I don't know why they were pushing it so much.
Yeah, I have no idea. It seems so ridiculous because the people who are paying the most are the people who can't afford it, and
Yeah.
it's just it's wild to me how and I voted for Josh Hawley, and it's
Mhm.
wild to me how these people will do the old bait and switch. We're
Mhm.
here for you until it comes across or comes against our self-interest.
Yeah.
And Josh Hawley is a great politician who sides with Missourians until it's time for his personal issues to step into the weight of that. It's absolutely wild to me how that works. And it's
Yeah.
not like I grew up thinking Missouri is like not in a very important place. It's always been described to me as a flyover state.
Yeah.
But we're growing. We are absolutely growing. And I'm afraid that if we don't capitalize on some of this stuff now, it's going to fester up and become a huge problem later on down the line. And another one of those issues is minimum wage,
Mhm.
and the sick leave that we just voted for.
Right.
Like it's now it's been taken away from us. How did they do that?
Right. Well, that's because on a technical level, I can answer that question because was that Proposition A
Yeah,
that was a statutory change, which means it's a change in the law. So, being a law, the legislators in Jefferson City can change the law. So that's what they do. They make laws, they change laws, etc. So they took the earned sick leave and I think they left the minimum wage hike to $15 in there, but then they no longer track. It was going to track inflationary rate after that, but they took that away. So they're just going to say, okay, you can move it to $15 an hour by January 2026 or something like that, but no more raises after that. Well, we all know that inflation is going to, catch up with it again, and we'll be in the same position in a few years. But yeah, so they took all that away. Amendment 3 was undermined. which really surprised me. And I don't think many people are talking about this, but Amendment 3 uh, made abortion legal
Yeah.
in the state of Missouri up to the point of viability or something in that area. And so now it's constitutional. It's written in the Constitution. So the legislators cannot change that because it's not a statute, it's a constitution. But the Missouri Supreme Court recently said, no, the old laws banning abortion should still hold true, even though we know that those old laws are unconstitutional. And I don't understand the convoluted reasoning. Now, whether or not you believe, the woman has a right to bodily autonomy, the issue
Yeah,
here
you
is,
got to take that. You got to separate those issues because
yeah,
this is something
exactly.
that I personally voted for, and now they're taking it away. That pisses me off
Yeah,
because they're not listening to the voters.
right.
This is what we want, and th- listen, if they didn't want the language that we had, if they didn't want that, they should have changed it before it was put on the ballot.
Yeah,
But once it was put on the ballot and it was voted for, you must side with the voter because that's what we chose. And
right.
it really, really upsets me and pisses me off that they went the opposite direction. And I'm going to remember this when it
Yeah,
comes time to cast my ballot again. And that's one of the reasons why I'm talking to you, Dan, is because I'm so frustrated and pissed off at local politics. On the national level, those politics, that it doesn't even matter because right here at home, everything's a mess.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. It was funny because, when I first thought about running, I thought, well, I got to run for, national, like U.S. Congress or something like that, which is a really steep hill to climb. Um, because I thought that's where the action is. And the more I studied it, and I did a lot of podcasts and talked to a lot of people and realized, no, actually, the power really, the behind the scenes power was really taking place at the state level. And it's each of our 50 states has this power that not many people realize. But I tell you who did realize it was the Republican Party. They realized this several decades ago, and they started pushing towards state legislatures in an extremely successful maneuver, I might add. And now the Democrats are like, oh, how did that happen? Like, well, you idiots, you should have been looking at this earlier because this
Right.
is what was going on. But long story short, though, yeah, Missouri is pretty messed up. And this like recent decision by the Supreme Court of Missouri flies in the face of, I think it's called a implied repeal. It's a legal concept. I just learned about it myself, but it basically says anytime a law or a constitutional amendment changes or invalidates an older law, the newer law or the new constitution takes precedent. Except in America, they seem to want to challenge it all the time. And so
Yeah.
the Missouri Supreme Court said, well, these old laws are still on the books. We still have to enforce them. And I'm screaming at the top of my lungs that no, it's unenforceable. You cannot
Yeah.
enforce it. So I don't know. I'm with you. It's like, why is it, Missouri says they want to do certain things like clean Missouri. We did that back in 2018, which was supposed to change the way in which we gerrymander our districts. That was undermined by the legislature. They keep going after right to work. They keep saying, no, we want right to work in Missouri, and Missouri voters keep voting it down. But
Yeah,
Jason Dean,
that's such a stupid thing in 2025 as well. Like
yeah, if
I can't believe right to work is actually a thing,
oh,
even right
it's
now. It's wild. Like the state next to us, Kansas, their minimum wage is like $7 an hour,
yeah, yeah,
So I think it is federal minimum wage. It's like 750 or something like that. But they are
it's
a right to
ridiculous.
work state. And so instead of instead of being able to pay or instead of having to pay a competitive wage, uh, their state contracts are able to dictate as low as $7.50 an hour, and that's
Yeah,
that's embarrassing. Like I can't believe that there are politicians in Kansas that actually advocate for that, and then it's worked its way over here. I have no
yeah,
idea why. I'm with you on that. Right to work. It's bullshit, man.
yeah. It's bad. It's unions have been cut down quite a bit. I keep going back to 1980 because I think that's kind of when the stuff that like the anti-worker movement started taking root. It started taking root slightly before that, but 1980 is a good year to pin down as a pivotal year, and union membership was twice of what it is right now, and so it's diminishing. And if you want to talk about make America great again, let's go back and take a look at what made America great. If you go back to the 40s, 50s, and 60s, you'll see that it's the unions that built out the middle class. Yet the
Absolutely.
unions
And
are being,
what they
what's that?
did to bring what they did to bring all that they so the unions had to go through a lot of shit back in the day
Yeah,
to get us what we have now. And I think that's why they're losing popularity today, Dan, is because back in the day they used to speak softly and carry a big stick,
yeah.
and um, we are so averse to violence and so averse to, boy, a lot of the things that the unions had to go through to get where we are now, we're totally averse to that. And like we see, like, okay, Los Angeles right now is on fire, you know. Back in the day, that's the kind of stuff that unions used to do to get their way. And like we won't ever see anything like that ever again.
I hope we do. I hold out hope for it. I think we have to get back to what works. We talk about unions. I think unions did a wonderful job of building out the middle class in this nation and really, really contributed greatly to the dominance we had for at least
Oh
three
yeah,
decades after the
for
war.
sure.
And then we started cutting back on unions. The first thing Reagan did when he got to be president was to fire the air traffic controllers, and that set off a cascading series of anti-union rhetoric that kept coming out of primarily the Republican Party, but yeah, the Democrats are kind of in on it too. So, it in education is another one. You talked about public education
Yeah.
earlier. It started off as from what I understand, started off as a experiment in Massachusetts back in, I think, the 1820s, because they decided that, well, first of all, they took in the information. They said, why do we have kids that aren't educated at all? We got kids that can't read. We have kids that can read, but kids that know math, kids that don't know math, and so on. So they decided to standardize it all. And there was a wonderful experiment. And it served this nation tremendously well over the years. And now there is a concerted effort to destroy the public schools. And again, I got to say, okay, if you want to go back to making America great again, whatever the hell that means,
That's where
why
you
don't we get
start.
back? Why don't we get back to the things that worked rather
Yeah.
than destroying the things that worked? Yeah. So,
Absolutely. And to go along with your point, back in the day, I don't remember when or remember. I don't know when this happened or like what era. But American public schools were geared toward churning out factory workers.
yeah,
And we need to get back to that, in my opinion. We need to, like, whatever factory workers we're going to have, if we're going to do automation, we need engineers, all kinds of stuff like that. But I think somewhere along the line, educators have gotten confused about what their job is.
mhm,
And they are for the kids. We're doing this for the kids. Well, kind of, but not really. What you're doing is you're doing this for everybody as a whole. And I think the public education system needs to not focus so much on education, but focus on churning out good citizens, like good
mhm,
people, people who are smart, people who are proactive in problem solving, um, people who have pride, not only national pride, not state pride, but just pride in themselves,
right.
pride in what they do, pride in manufacturing, all kinds of stuff that we need to get back to the basics on. And I think public education, it's I think people just need to go back and remember what it was intended to be. I think it was intended to bring out workers, not not raise test scores. And one thing back in the day, I think I can't remember what year it was, but George Bush brought out No Child Left Behind,
Yeah, I remember that.
and that was one of the worst things that has ever happened to American education
Yeah.
because it did the exact opposite of what was intended. Now, my 15-year-old just did summer school. He failed biology this year, so he had to do summer school. Credit recovery is what they call it. He finished a 7 month course in I think it was two weeks, 2.5 weeks,
Oh
and
my
he's going to
goodness.
get a full credit for it. And I don't know how much he's going to retain of that, but he
Right.
passed, and that's what's important to them is that he passed that test. Now, how
Hmm.
easy did they have to make that test so everybody passes it? That's what No Child Left Behind did is
Yeah.
instead of making everything higher, it brought the high down to where everybody was at. It brought the high scores down to baseline. So that way baseline looks like a genius, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That I have so many stories, but I'll give you one here where my son, he's 30 years old now, but I remember when he was in high school and I challenged him to take the challenging courses, take what they call college prep courses. So he took advanced courses in math and science and so on. Even though he didn't pursue that route the rest of his life, he's now a video producer. But I remember talking to with one of his teachers. We had a parent-teacher meeting and had several of them, but at one of them I was talking to one of his teachers and saying, um, eh, college prep. When I was going to school, college prep was like, ooh, that was like, you're getting ready to move on in life, right? That was the upper level course. She said, no, college prep is we want all kids to feel like they're going to go to college, so all of our courses are labeled college prep.
Right.
I couldn't stop laughing. It was like, you got to be kidding me. It's some kids don't want to go to college and they shouldn't have to, right?
Absolutely.
There's other avenues available for children. Some kids do need to go to college because that's where their life goes. So, why, I could go on and on. It's even gotten in the US Marines. My nephew graduated from the Marines quite a few years ago and out in San Diego there where he was training and I went to his graduation ceremony and after the ceremony, I got to talking to him. I says, "Hey, how did it go? How many people washed out of your platoon or whatever?" He said, "Oh, nobody washed out." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, well, they should have kicked some of these guys out, but they have this idea that everybody's got to pass." I says, "You got to be effing kidding me," because I know not everybody's cut out for the Marines, and they should be cutting people out of those
Right.
programs that can't make it. But it says, your life is on the line. When you're out there in a real situation, real combat situation, you don't want to have to second guess the guy next to you. So
Yeah,
I
and
couldn't
but
believe
that's
it.
that's another problem with our society though, is we're all soft. And
Yeah.
like I'm no different. Like I would have loved to be, in the military, but I couldn't pass the physicals.
Hmm.
Not only could I not pass, I was too fat, but I also had a couple medical issues that were disqualifying. And
Right.
I could have gotten a waiver, but again, I was too fat. So um, I actually do like some of the things that they're doing right now. I think they're extending some boot camps to incorporate like a fat people camp,
Hmm.
like to get down to weight before you actually start MEPS and training. I think that's going to help a lot. But another thing I think that will help a lot is implementing physical education standards into schools
Yes.
again.
Yeah.
That's a like here in Missouri, we don't have any physical education standards that I know of. I know that we have my 15-year-old son has an option whether he can go to JROTC or he can do physical education. Well, he does JROTC and he only has PT one time a week and
Mm.
for JROTC, which is physical education class kind of. But we do not have we don't have the same standards that we had when I was a kid. I
Yeah,
had to
that's
do the sit up test. You remember that one?
yeah. I had to go through
I
all
think
that.
it
Yeah, there
started
was
back
the
in the 70s. We
yeah,
don't
that
do
was
any of
the
that anymore.
they had the presidential challenge. I remember back then that if you
Yeah,
did
that's
really
exactly
well,
what it was.
yeah, it was. Yeah, that was pretty bad. I think to her credit, Michelle Obama, I think tried to restart some of that
Yeah.
with her programs. I don't think she got very far with it, but I think she had the right idea that insofar as nutrition and physical exercise is concerned, we need to bring that back in. Um, yeah, I'm kind of floored when I look at some of the requirements of the kids these days in high school. I'm thinking, I'm not going to go back to the days where they crack a whip, or hit your knuckles with rulers or something like that. But they got to challenge the kids, though.
Yeah.
And I know that, like my son, I took a lot of math because I'm an engineer, so I had to take a lot of math. And so my son was taking math courses in high school, and I could see right away he catches on to it much faster than I did. Yeah, I just got through it by just being stubborn and just studying until my eyeballs fell out. But he was like one of those kids that just, but it was optional for him though. It was optional, and I made him take those tougher courses, but it was optional. He went all the way up through calculus, but yeah, I think they should push all the kids. There's no
Oh,
reason why a
absolutely.
kid can't learn calculus by the time they're a junior or a senior.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, and as far as literature goes, I think the same challenges should be there as well. They're just not, I think if you don't challenge the kids, they end up spending their time on the cell phones and doing other stupid
Yes.
things that the kids do. Need to take away their phones when they go to school. They can have
I would
phones, yeah.
actually, I'm actually for that. Let's take them away.
Yeah, take them away. Yeah, check them in. You can have phones, but you got to check them in when you get to school in the morning, and the phone stays in your locker or wherever they lock it up. They let you have it when you go home.
You know
But
what's something that might help actually in schools is take the computers away, put everything back to pen and paper.
yeah, I don't disagree with that actually. That's an interesting idea. It's a really
I
interesting.
think I noticed a lot when my with my kids' education I stopped being able to help them when they trans everything's on computers now. And instead of
Mhm.
buying these $350 books, they're buying 800 to $1,000 computers every year. And everything like so they do need formal training with computers, the kids do, because everything is computerized.
Right.
The problem is it's made them so damn lazy
Yeah.
and they don't read through assignments. I physically watched my 15-year-old doing an assignment where he just clicked through
Yeah.
and he was able to pass that way. And it's they've made testing to where it's multiple choice. Every
Mhm.
test is multiple choice. There's no critical thinking in any of this stuff, and I think they would. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt education for kids ultimately to take electronics and computers away, but I think it's needed. I think they need to go backwards a little bit.
Yeah, it comes down to how do humans relate to each other.
Yeah.
And and that's really what school I think has two purposes. One is, of course, the academics. The other one is social. And they
Yes.
have to learn both. And I question, even if you can learn academics, if everything is multiple choice. I one of my favorite things back in high school, I'm kind of a nerd, I know, but like I loved essay tests where you could just write down everything you knew, like it was history or whatever. I mean, I loved writing it down. Math, when you're doing math, there's no option there. You have to write down, you have to show your
Yeah.
work, sort of thing. So I always love doing that because it shows the teacher that I know the stuff. And multiple choice, sometimes they try to trip you up on things to try to confuse you. I don't think that's right either. I think they should just find out whether you have that knowledge or not. And if the kids go home and have ChatGPT write their term paper for them, fine. But then the teacher's going to sit down with them for a half an hour and say, okay, now I want you to defend what you've written. And that's where the truth is going to come out. And the kid will be clueless if you let
Yeah.
ChatGPT do everything. He's going to be clueless. But who knows if kids are getting, artificial intelligence to write their papers these days? I mean, that's easy to do.
You said something very interesting. You said make them defend it. And
Yeah,
I think when you are listening to people talk about their political preferences, their social preferences, any of that stuff, if they cannot articulate and defend their position oftentimes, I find that a lot. Now, I can't even do that with when I go to defend my positions on a certain thing. It's more tacit knowledge for me. Like I know it in my heart and my body, and that's. But explaining it is totally different. Explaining it to somebody that isn't in my head and doesn't know my thought process, that's difficult for me.
yeah,
And I think that's probably because I wasn't challenged enough when I was younger.
yeah. It could be. I mean, I think it's a learned thing though too. You could even do it now. Like, I can completely agree with what you're saying, because sometimes I'll get challenged in some of my thought processes, and I'll say, "Oh, now I have to really respond to that challenge. And do I have all the facts straight in my head?" There's one trap you can fall into when someone says, "I want to see your receipts," because by the time you actually show them the receipts, they've moved on to something else. So
Right.
it's kind of a bait and switch. But um, but no, I think you're right. If you can speak with confidence about something and be challenged on it and be open, because I think a lot of times, you if you show curiosity and if you show humility, people respect that as well. Because every time I interact with somebody, just as we are right now, I'm learning things. I'm learning things from
Absolutely.
you, and we have to be open to that.
Absolutely, man. I think you know what, Dan. I want to talk to you some more. I think we're going to have to do this again.
Mhm.
Um, I'm just I love talking to people in general, but I like talking to the other side. And right now in social circles, I'm considered your other side. I don't think as conservative as most people think I am. My wife, though, boy, my wife's conservative. Uh,
Wow.
but I'm more the yin to her yang. I
Mhm.
think more deeply about things. There's a lot of things that there's a lot of things with national politics I kind of cringe when I hear them,
Yeah.
but ultimately I understand why things are the way they are and why people are the way they are. It's just wild to me. Not very many people on the left are willing to come on the podcast
Oh,
and
really? Yeah.
have discussions. And every time that I've had a person from the left on the pod, it's always done really well. Like we've always had a really good conversation. I think people are more afraid that I might be like adversarial with them, even
Hmm.
if I disagree with them. And that's not me. If I disagree with you, like if we can't discuss things, we'll agree to disagree and we'll move on from that subject and we'll
Exactly.
talk about something different. But open dialogue to me is very, very important. And like, say, if we didn't have a very good conversation today, that'd be a great reason for us to do it again because
Yeah.
open dialogue and people talking their differences out, that's what progresses us farther along the line. Not fighting, not bickering, not protesting, not burning shit down, and I don't like you lived through 2014 there in St. Louis there. That was a mess down there during the
Oh, yeah.
Ferguson riots.
I
Boy,
had just arrived here at that point because I was living in Los Angeles for quite a few years before that.
where are you from actually?
Well, I mean, I was raised in Missouri. I was raised in North County, Missouri, Florissant, was the name of the city. Went to McClure High School. Um, Technically, I was born in Milwaukee. We kind of moved around, but we settled in, and so my formative years were spent in St. Louis, and I graduated in 82 from University of Missouri, Columbia, Mizzou. And I came back to Missouri. I came back to St. Louis, worked for a few years. Then I decided I'm going to go to see what's going on in California. So I thought I'd go out there for a couple of years. Ended up being out there for almost 30 years.
Oh man,
So I
you're
just
so
gotten
lucky.
back. Well, the thing is, funny thing is that when I moved out to LA, the Rams moved from LA to St. Louis. And then when I moved back to St. Louis, the Rams moved from St. Louis back to LA. So I think I'm the one responsible for those moves.
Yeah, I'm a weird fan of that team. Boy, I loved them when they were in St. Louis, but now they're just kind of meh, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Well, you got the Chiefs, man. That's a worthy team. So,
Hell yeah, they are. Speaking of the Chiefs, boy, I just love them. And training camp's coming up, and we have training camp here in St. Joe, and it's a good time. It's always a good time, and I'm always kind of shocked by the amount of people that come just for training
oh
camp.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's brought our city back to be on the map, and now I am I'm all for, like football stuff coming and being in my city. As a matter of fact, we have an arena league, I think is what it is. And Travis Kelsey and Jason Kelsey, which are two footballers,
Mhm.
they bought part of the team, so they're part owners of this arena football league
Cool.
in town here. And it's so, and that ties in with like the podcast. They do a podcast, the Kelsey brothers, and it's just amazing how things are happening on a emotional and economic level because
Yeah,
the Chiefs are winning. And I never thought that I would see the day that they won a Super Bowl, let alone two of them. So,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it,
That's a great job. You talk about their training camp. When I lived in Oxnard, California, which I call everything LA, but it's LA area. It's up the coast from Los Angeles. Um, but in Oxnard, California, for many years, the Dallas Cowboys used to have their summer training camp there, and that would draw huge crowds. It was
oh
like
yeah.
it put us on the map, and it was fun. I didn't never actually attended one of those events, but it was just fun to have all these people in town and getting all that attention and everything. I'd
Yeah, we've
drive by
had
and it'd just be like crowds of people and stuff. So,
Yeah, we've had that training camp for a few years now, and I've never went. I think I stood outside one time. It was free to go, and I stood there for a little bit. But usually, it's middle of summertime, and it's really hot.
yeah.
And I'm a stay-at-home dad, so I usually have a lot to do with the kids. And none of my kids are into football, so none of them.
Oh,
I've got four kids, and none of them are into football. So
oh, man, what
yeah,
kind of
I know.
Americans are they? What are you talking about here?
Right. That's what I said. Like they don't even like baseball. That I was like, that's America's favorite pastime. But you know what? They'll eat a bunch of hot dogs. That's what they'll do.
Yeah, I'd be more of a fan, I guess, if I could actually play sports, but I was notoriously bad at it.
Me
So,
too. Me too. I did pretty well in baseball for a season. I did pretty well hitting the ball, but
mm,
then for whatever reason, I couldn't hit the ball. I couldn't throw the ball. It was like, and then I lost all interest. I was like 8. And
uh,
so I lost all interest in playing, and I got into other things like girls and stuff like that. And in 2014, when the Royals uh, went to the World Series, they lost. I was back in it, and I was like, man, this is so great to be like a kid again. I felt like a kid again. And then in 2015, the Royals won the World Series, and I cried. I'm total sports nut, and
yeah,
so it was one of those good times. But Dan, like I said, we're gonna have to get together and do this again. And here in a few weeks, actually, I'll probably just reach out to you and see
sure.
what's going on. But where can people find you?
They can find me online, dan4mo.com. That's the number four, Dan, number four, MO for Missouri, dan4mo.com. And from there, you can just get all the links to everything else I do. I've been trying for a long time now and succeeding of writing one article per day. Sometimes these articles are kind of worthless because I don't have any good ideas, but I'll write them anyways. But
Hey,
some
as
of them
long
are
as
like,
50% of the job is showing up, right?
yeah, exactly. And I feel it puts my word out there a bit. So anyway, so you can go from there to my to this place called Frontline Progressive, which is a place where I publish my papers. You can also branch off from there to go to I have a TikTok channel out there. Um, do some Facebook stuff, the usual social media stuff. But danformo.com is your jump off point for that.
Awesome. We'll link all that down in the description down below. Dan, it's been a great time. I'm gonna have to cut this conversation a little short today, but
Sure. Yeah.
we'll absolutely get together and do this again. And if you're ever on this side of the state, man, we'll get together and do this in studio.
Yeah, I get out there once in a while. I have some good friends living down in the right across the border in Kansas over there, so I'll probably come out there sometime this summer.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, hit me up and we'll get together and we'll do this in studio.
Sounds great. Great.
All right, man. We'll see you guys later.